right. Obeisance to Meguro and protector Manjushri, who holds in his heart the scriptural text embodies of these things or things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun unclouded by defilements or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with a patient love of Father for his only Son. All creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You, as dragon, thunder proclamation of the Dhamma, arise from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, whose powerful sword of wisdom hews that suffering wherever its sparks appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. I entreat you, Manjushri, whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, who has completed the 10 stages, achieving the highest perfection of a Bodhisattva, who has been pure from the beginning. O Manjushri, your loving one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness and close in my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, some might gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Sashi pe ji ju shi le to ta ri ra ni shi ni de gen pa di san ge shi do mi te o wa hi do ku nam da shin lan chu par sho idang guru ratna
mandala niya mi Sanji Jedan Tsojin Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dani Kyabsun Che Dagi Chushi Gibin Tsonam Drola Benshi Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Jedan Tsojin Chonam La Chanchu Pardu Dani Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Gibin Tsonam Gi Drola Benshi Sanji Drupara Sho Sanji Chedan Tsojin Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Gibin Tsonam Gi Drolam Sanji Druparan Sho Kanki Tuzi Nizone Dawa Tamche Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Tenze Kwadam Tela Changze Lo Good morning everyone. 나는 가진 참 되는 뭐 록샤고스라 니버 동을 쌈비 거바 세디 동을 쌈비 거바 이게 동을 쌈비 거바 사지디레샤스.
So we're going to pick up today from verse 105. Let's look at the outline. So we've been looking at the section of explaining the reasons why it is reasonable to meditate on the equation of self with others. In abandoning objection, we covered point A. Today we're going to pick up from point B that says the need to reflect upon suffering.
대다디 사지기 용약이 다 가서 다 갑종로디 카진기 자와 쇼로카 야드 주미시디 닌지 동안 만기위 지셔내기 깨지는 로유 동안 삼치나 제대로 닌지 동안 망세디 될 때니다 로 아니 닌지 가서 동안 삼비 고바디 송구여러 왔으라.
The purpose or the need of reflecting upon suffering was taught in the previous verse, in verse 104, which says, First of all, with the objection, since compassion will multiply suffering greatly, why should I diligently develop it? The response to that was, if one were to contemplate the suffering of migrating beings, how could the suffering of compassion be more?
Kadi dunghar chiginis, dunghar mambu mengyurna, zedan dembi dunghar di randa jenla kejanyes. Tena medo danzigi gyabi neba shigyani dagi dunghar mas saldi mambu dunghar sengyurchirs.
So in relation to that, it's when now we're looking at verse 105 and 106 to read, if by one suffering, much suffering would be destroyed, some people would produce it for themselves and others. Thus, Supusha Chandra, although aware of the harm the king would cause him, did not prevent his own suffering because it would eradicate the suffering of many.
Kansanata dunghar sambi godun di pigi shengi dunghar ya chikshuk samondi kawla ya ani kawla ya chik semla ya madishikshi chik yongya chik yungu yosares ra yungu yosares ta yina ya ani chik ti shengi dunghar sambi tobji ani rangi tsok dela do zoya ani nyumumba de shiji droba ani chik nyurdus pigi pang tuyagi kepa di drogi yoenza ani goba tso de terwas ra.
The purpose of thinking of suffering is that although from time to time it is possible that you will feel uneasy or unhappy about suffering, but still it depends upon such contemplation, you will easily you will easily complete the collections, and you will quickly abandon the two obscurations, cognitive and afflictive obscurations.
Gyawaram jitindi songsha tanda Geshe lang thamba pe ngonde thani kita chik chanju semgi nyamlen kita chik ani tukyu yons khandingi chik kiwi chawarsa ani khong tuta to pigile ya chik ani shere di pe kasa tanga shesamashin kyolang soro chik pe manzu mi ani chik ngushodo chik di dong chik chayoras o dindri namba do chik thoni ani tuta to dindri ani pewiyores kasna ta simjing dunghar dipe ani kaduyna ta ninji chembe shawon kyong di chik ani pe ninji ni simjen la ya ta ninji wangi pe kaduyna pe ani ku number di kyolang ji tola ya chi gemu zawani ni ani chi gemu number meba dindi chi chin shugiyores ti chi di chi lombe modozo ge lang thambang ani donak bas lar donak bas min tola ya min dindita yores.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama mentioned before the stories related to Langtampa. So Geshe Langtampa is someone that was a practitioner of the mind of enlightenment, in a sense that at the very core of his heart, he gave rise to Bodhisattva, the mind of enlightenment. And he always seemed to be depressed. Now, when you looked at his facial expression, it always seemed to be gloomy, in that it seems always it was about to burst into tears. So it is said that he was like that because he was always considering the sufferings of others. He was generating compassion to sentient beings who are beset by suffering, and therefore people did not see him smile. It was always had that kind of dark expression, and this is how it was renowned in the area that he came from. People call him in Tibetan you say kind of the dark-faced person, which means that kind of you have that gloomy expression on your face.
Pigi tachi chanjuk sem nyamlen nandengi ninji la ya ngone tachi ninji ki tugi yons ani chuk dengi ki ta gewishingi jimba na pigi tuta de be gemutsi chin ro de yungu ya samaro asra and dang anzo dawajla ya chi ani kadina chi kyolang rojin ro de baina ani me khanga maga osoro chi mit pusu to do ka chi yung thongro ra 원액이 아니 깨우 담바도수 딘디 페기어서레스라 딘디 여서레스다 그게 심진신 그 동할 싸움디 봐 아니 닌지 코네 샤원디 교원디 투레야 아니 지 가르서다 로톱다 도수 용구여다 있는 양지 그 넘바텔이야 피게 가르서다 지 간지 인지 또기 pen 미치셔야 서버 리기 바바당 서버 용구도 어디나시 지베 낭길레 돼야지 용구여서레스
So if we were to be, so if sorry, so should there be a spiritual teacher that is a serious practitioner of the mind of enlightenment, having developed compassion, that person would likely not smile. It is likely that they would not be going around with a gazing smile on the face, but rather the face would be quite gloomy. But here, if we were to carry around such expression in that always we would seem to be that gloomy, probably others around us will feel uncomfortable. They would say that it seems that we're going a bit too uptight about it. So anyway, when we consider Langin Tampa, it was solely controlled or moved by compassion. So deep in his heart, he had great courage, but still the appearance was just like we sometimes say, tears flowing down and the hair on one's body standing on end, getting goosebumps when I'm thinking of the suffering of sentient beings.
레당안주 딘도지 통고라다 비기게 직결랑랑다 직 남규르티 아니 셴부도 통바이나 콜레야 샘디지여서리 그 지금 네바지 칸거여서 말에 썸썸로지 아니 딘디여로스터 원에게 다 뒤따도 아니 샘레야 드라메기 베닌지 샤원 교댕이게 아니 깨우 담바초 오늘 전에 지금 만다지 인고서레스 아니 지좀 멜레 소만나시 안간수 지원디기 아니 비기래야 깨우 담바 임바 만지버치 툭닌지 챔비고 베 샤원 교대버여 만지버치 동근 남교대 냠바슈치 텐데 유로치 아니 캔자오르치 통대야지 간지 아니 인고라스 파쇼메 깨우 담베 세온디 간주 닌제지 간주베 아니 가르소다 작당 모성의 샤원이 결정이 남향의 샤원이 결정이 메세디 오늘 전에기 추수스 땅댕이 딘지지 통디 아카 삼대지 윤거라스 인자 아니 멜레소모나지 지도 멜레소모나지 직딩 기때디 멜라뇽바통 멜레티딘 직딩 뇽바통 세지 오 딘지지 야시야다모 여사레스로.
So if we see someone going around with that gloomy expression on the face, we're going to probably think that poor guy, poor person. It seems that they're unhappy. It's probably that they do not get what they want. But still, when we think of how those great beings of the past have acted, it seems that those great beings, those holy beings, had a different approach to the cultivation of bodhicitta and the mind of enlightenment. Like, for example, the great Tibetan yogi Milarepa was a great being, and yet Geshe reckons that had we come across Milarepa, probably we would not see him as a great being as he was. We would not see him as someone that was a practitioner of bodhicitta, but someone that is rather strange. So when we come across someone that is affected by anger and attachment, controlled by those states of mind, someone that is affected by distraction, someone that is wasting away their life, we should think to yourself, alas, that person is in a pitiful place, or that person is in a pitiful state. In a way that is similar to what Milarepa said in one of his songs. When the world looks at me, they think that I'm crazy. When I look at the world, I think that they're crazy.
There's that David Namalia, Kadi Dungar Chonsen Jonyas, Dungar Chicken, Draw Taibi, Koyu Dunga Mambo, Mevan Gurna, Tension to Chevi, Zewa the Dembi, and Teta with Dungar de, round the Shanla, Keber Chawa, Ni Inons. Tena Dingin Gabble song, but Chanjus and Medo Danzi Girani Subi, Gabi never Shija, Ne, Dagi Dungar Masterti, Tam de Lambe, Simjim Mambe, Dungar 7 giver Sini. Teacher don't corgi daughter Mazemba trying to shoot Shenos.
Now, the commentary to these two verses say, if it were the case that one insignificant suffering eliminates the many samsaric sufferings of infinite migrators, then since it has a great purpose, it is only suitable for oneself and others to generate this suffering out of affection. As it is stated in the King of Concentration Sutra, even though the Bodhisattva Supushpa Chandra knew that he would receive the harm of being killed by the king, he did not eliminate his own sufferings, but accepted it, as he saw that this would alleviate the suffering of many sentient beings, and proceeded to the town. He did not listen to his entourage who tried to stop him.
Tether gombe payula, the shanky dongar tether gombe payutelaya, and in payun among us, Jandun laya chick to shore showala, dongar chempo mevatans, Jandun laya, one the tanigi, Kasota, Suzuki, Loy top Yons Zobadi, P. Jandun sambalaya, and Cho Tubayana. Medelaya Dungar Chembo Yungumares, Dungar Chembo Myong Mase, Deva Chok to Kirby, Jendel and Jubas, Kazana, lot of Shin to Cheondi, any Kari in a cert to get Dungar Chejon Karichonaya, any cert to get Levina, and in Dungar Katsuki Chembuji Chebanaya, cert to Vana, Dig Dungar Nyoya di, Shuchon Droga Sarasra. And Rangi Tebashiva, Nargel La Soba, Kanji, and Lo Maron Choki, Lord Sama, Shiver Givata, and Landa Namela Deba Meba, Jigdin Chigi on the Dova Meba, Chut Namda Yoya, and Gunzen Tena, Darjin Yamba Gomrikbase, such a Dustamudada.
Let's look at the benefits of such meditations. This section consists of 5 points. The first is, since singly applying oneself to the welfare of others is not in itself great suffering. So if you were to apply yourself solely to the welfare of others in thinking of the suffering of others, then not only it will not give you suffering, through the fortitude that you develop in your heart in thinking of alleviating either great or small suffering of sentient beings, your own pain, your own suffering will be quite small. Not only that, because of the courage that you will have in your heart to dispel the suffering of others, you will experience happiness, as it says in point B, as the bliss of that is supreme, one engages in working for others' welfare. So not only you will be undaunted, you'll also derive pleasure from working for the sake of others. And in so doing, afflictive states of mind, such as arrogance or pride, will be pacified. And the pleasures and benefits of such meditations will not depend on reciprocation and fully ripened effect. You will not be sick, you will not be desiring the effects of such actions. And it is due to such reasons that meditating on the equality of self and others is said to be reasonable.
Tambu Shendon la Chik du Showala, Ta Chik du Bigi Shendon la Showala, Dongar Chembo Meba ni, Tether Gun Komkurba, Jengi Dongar, Shigawi, Pemin Sur Nambatar, Narme Bayan Juban Gurs.
Now, when we begin with the first point that comes out of the heading of singly applying oneself to the welfare of others is not in itself great suffering, in verse 107, it says, one who is continually familiarized in this way, since he takes joy in pacifying others' suffering, will enter even relentless torment, just as a swan enters a lotus pool.
Revolution. Marshaba Tether Rangi Guni, Darjin Yamba Gomba, Comber Guna, Jengi Donga Shiva Gavi, T7 Debala, Pemi Sor Namban Jubatar, Rangi Dongar Keduseni, Troshen Nameban Juban Givi, Jendon Jubala, Yigi Dongar Meadows, Ilia, Gaj Trojan and Jubamato, and it's Zawin Dunga Yomar, Ila Dunga Yomares.
Now looking at the commentary to verse 107, it says, if one's continuum becomes habituated to the meditation of equalizing self and others, as explained before, then one takes joy in pacifying the suffering of others. In order to destroy the suffering of others, one will disregard one's own suffering and happily enter even the hell without respite, as if it were a lotus pond. One will not have any mental suffering working for the purpose of others.
Ti Deva Chok Gurvi, Jendon Jubanis, Niba, Ti Deva Jendon Jubani, Simjan Nam the Torwana, Gavi Jamso Kaimba, Tenikin Chokman Nam, Tawan Devi Chichas.
Verse 108 comes under the heading of, as the bliss of that is supreme, one engages in working for others' welfare. Now it reads, will not the ocean of joy, if all beings are free, satisfy me? What is the use of desiring liberation?
That's Simjan Tamji Dunga, Simjan Tamji Dungali, and a Trondugi, some Chima Maimba Giavanza, Simjan Tamji Pigi Tachik Siva Dungali Tortuna, and the Gawa Pame, Gawa Pame, the Gawa Yons Gavi Yons Simba, Labor Kama, Kaimba Tinigi, Dedon Tamjin Jibi, the Semlaya Ngomba Yungres. And Dinzata Dili Haji and Kargorisando, Chomeno, Rani Chibu Tawan Devi Chishijas, Simjan Tamjelaya, and Simjan Tamje Dungali Trova Tishani, Rani Chibu Dungali Trovadi, the Shujuta, Godens Kimando as Chishijas, Simjan Tamji, then Driven Analaya, Simjan Tamji, much of a chamber chini, tea turned to somber showers.
If you generate the uncontrived wish to free sentient beings from suffering, even if you remain in samsara, you will be satiated by pleasure, by joy, like a swan plunging into a pool. So what purpose, Shantideva says, is seeking to attain the state of liberation for my own sake alone.
This.
So then it says in the commentary, if one liberates sentient beings from cyclic existence, then one will be filled by an ocean of joy that accomplishes all one's wishes, and one will be satisfied. Is this not superior? What uses to desire liberation only for oneself? Remembering that all sentient beings have not accomplished it, one would strive for their purpose.
Odirda Kanji Taran Devi Chishikchas, Ranchigbu Ra Pigita, Simjan Tamji Sada, Rangli Shengi Dungardan, Rangi Dungar Silaundi, Kazan Shubana Jingi, on the Dajinyam, Ani Rangli Shenchebadi, Jen Kechabadi, Kot Shambasong Madamania, Trangi Chani, Trangi Chachibu Ton Zondawana, Jen Siondi, Tamebaji Chagonza. Labchen was in the Ranchigbugi, Tava Tobi, Ranchigbu Dungali Turni, Shushujigipe, and the Labchija came Mundos, said the dire 타원 대비 지식 자세야디 란직불을 수자야디 아니 신 심진 코를 트로스라운디 타메비 심진 되려야 스나운디 개체종 토니 베 아니 캐버슈치 여버디 아니 자비낭로야 디송구여레스타 로 라도도 전주낭로야 비 개체종 토니 로 랑다 신세디 개체종 토니 송구 여버마도 아니 균제 맹아 둥 피기 마시 틴델레 자르니 로종디 존주 나로라요 ngosongo ay no samsong dingara thoba insiro ina yazuru jing dewa jawandi ma cheba trans lawandi simjen thamji gi ma cheba tengors lawandi bigi mashi tinde gi lojondi tsu nembe jabe soraj songdo asra ina jonju na jasa chim shiwa ngos chupi sombe kadulya ani gunde menga dün di kanda jaryo na samsong des thoba dosra.
So here, if we were to consider the suffering of others and develop the wish to free others from suffering, here it says that you will not be controlled by seeking your own welfare, your own freedom from suffering, first and foremost, which is what happens to us with an attitude of cherishing ourselves and not cherishing others, cherishing ourselves more than we cherish others. But then as we think of how effective and powerful it would be to cherish others more than oneself, because to begin with, as we said before, when you consider self and others, I'm just one individual, just one individual, whereas sentient beings are limitless in numbers. So then in thinking of what would be more effective to dispel the suffering of just one individual or to dispel the suffering of a great multitude of sentient beings, of course, to dispel the suffering of a great number of sentient beings is more effective, much more powerful than one's own suffering. So here, when the text says, what is the use of desiring liberation? It means that what is the use of desiring liberation for my own sake alone? It would be much more useful or of greater purpose to free a multitude of living beings from suffering rather than desiring my own state of liberation alone. So it seems that here Shantideva is in his text, the Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, is emphasizing the importance of comparing between self and others, or juxtaposing self and others, and considering that the purpose of others is of a greater importance. And it seems that Geshe wonders if Shantideva here in this text did teach the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. Geshe doesn't feel that Shantideva teaches here in this text, and yet when you look at the comment that Geshe Dhammarinchen makes at the end of his explanation to this section, he says, remembering that all sentient beings have not accomplished it, but in the commentary more specifically, it says that in the commentary, kind of there's the commentary is a little bit ambiguous. You can read it in two ways. So you can say, remembering that all sentient beings have not accomplished it, one should strive for their purpose. Or the second way of reading it is, remembering that all sentient beings have been one's mother, becoming mindful of the fact that they have been one's mother, one should strive for the purpose. So therefore, it seems that according to this reading, you can say that Geshe Dhammarinchen applies the sevenfold cause and effect personal instruction in some sense to this section, but Geshe wonders if this is indeed the case. Stila integetola kandechi resena sentient tanchigi jeba meba chemba chene.
Samjan tamji
Ma jeba sedi mar jeba sigimare
ani
jeba meba Jensen Sergeant Tachi Dunge Casa Dungele Toa di Cheo Mares.
심전 탐지 동아리 trouati 수치요 말라와.
Senchi.
심진기.
Yeah. Jensen de la Kran Marjeva then the chamber then is so in bas Gyunjaminga du. Jensen Majeva se di Mar Maim, but the lagi mare Majeva se di Jeva Gapa.
아니. 랑직비기 타반되비기 지식자 심전 탐지기 마체바 템버 치네 템버 니네들도 베이들로다 심전 탐지기 마체바 심전 탐지기 랑기 마체바 슬라워라 베는 들으셔도다
Jaja ine de dile inchigetola Senchen Tanjigi Majeva. Majeva then lagi mare Majeva.
이네디 베시 겨르드 노르샤오 살상도
Mm.
아 야즈론직도 수 겨겨라 베이든 수 겨샤겨라 야즈론직 베이도라 가리아스는 심전 탐지기 마체바디 엔 템발이야 샤니 아니 디텐도 짱고 그랬어 디 지당 마체발이야 마제는 디워디네 갑디 단데 인지 돌아야 디스 겨고라 라
Jaja ine dila de dende mindra lokta mindra ni do.
야
So anyway, Geshe said that. So it seems that kind of you can read this section in two ways. Geshe is going with a way of that is different to what we have here in the commentary, and he says that he thinks that Getsuda Marinchin's intention is to say that remembering that all sentient beings have been our mothers, one should strive for the purpose. So therefore, Geshe said, what's the purpose of accomplishing the set of liberation for own sake alone, when you remember that all sentient beings have been your mothers?
다디 다케지 테사디 다 로단이 제바나 다케지 테사지 고라 다디 야즈rum지 만다요 말했어.
Since indeed in Tibetan you can read this line in two ways. Geshe says that at the end maybe we need to ask Getsuda Marinchin what he had, what point did he have in mind when he wrote this line?
어디래? 베이다 균데맹아 등그츠 카공바 있나? 아니 칙디 아니 심전 탐지기 랑기 마제바디 템발라샤니 아니 심전 탐지기 된려야 중국어 세디 로 수카공라 자와나 아니 고기 치무차로 거레스.
So Geshe says that still when you look at the meaning of verse 108, it says, will not the ocean of joy, if all beings are happy, satisfy me? What is the use of desiring liberation? So if you add to the commentary of this verse what Getsuda Marinchin adds, which is the practice of the sevenfold cause and effect person instructions, in which you recognize all sentient beings as having been your mothers, then of course you will have to work in order to free them from suffering. So it seems that what Geshe Marinchin does is even adding more reasons for freeing sentient beings from suffering.
제 베시 야즈론지 디 야지야도 디순고르 상고즈 간자 강기 자비치라야 타르반 데비 지식차세야디 랑치부 타르바데니 카르치고레스 심전 탐지기 랑기 마체바디 템발라자니 디 텐려야 심전 탐지기 텐려야 쩐고야디 기침부레스 어디 디다 페시 디순고요레스 네 도바디 디마르다 니 도바디 쫀죽인 데와 코랑마 갑장진 쫀죽인 데와 자원디 야스치마 시월레기 피 아니 다신 냠지고는 데도 균데 맹아도 유고는 데도라 쫀죽 종콩 칸이야 균데 맹아도 마시기 아니 로종디 찌디 땅인 제마서 디 템이어서 말 상거든요 다신 냠지 짬베고니 데야지 멘로 상거다.
And Geshe feels that his reading fits the reading of the last line in this verse. What is the use of desiring liberation, particularly when you become mindful, when you think of all sentient beings having acted as your mothers before? So that's not the point. That's not the main point that Geshe wanted to emphasize. The main point that he wanted to emphasize is that it seems that here Shantideva in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life is exclusively teaching the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others. Geshe is wondering, in kind of trying to think about the section that we've covered before in his previous study of this manual, whether Shantideva was referring at some point to the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. Geshe doesn't reckon that, doesn't think that Shantideva in this text have made a reference to the practice of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. Is teaching equalizing, exchanging self with others exclusively in these texts. And therefore the point that Geshe was wanting to make is that it seems that although this is what Shantideva does in his text, still Geta Dhammarenchen in his commentary has spoken about also considering that all sentient beings have been my mothers, which is a reference to the other practice of cultivating bodhicitta. Given that they've acted as our mothers, then we should, what is the use of liberation for my own sake alone?
저당 아니 다신 냠지 거네 아니 로장원디게 균제 맹아 등기 맹아 수 카공 야디 고 퍼섬 소비 양라 레스로 딩이 카공 촉 마르다 디 카공은 디그 마르딘디 라고 마르다스 이네 야투 가서 야스좀 쇼리 디 쫀죽 송이 갈이야 아니 균제 맹아 등디 수 자원이네 제 메조로시 당가랑 소나로 다디로 제 초그레스로 제 초그레스 이네 야스좀 쇼리 갑 두디 마 아니 맹아니 보디 제 송요레베스 라와이나 다딩 안주기 제버치고야지.
Having said that, it doesn't mean to say that you cannot supplement the explanation of this practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others with the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions. If you combine the two, actually, you get the branch of excellence in relation to this teaching. So it's not that it's not allowed to do it. Of course, it is allowed to do it, but then still Geshe's doubt is whether Shantideva in his text has made a reference to the sevenfold cause and effect personal instruction. Geshe reckons that he did not teach that in this manual.
직들이 가서다 다진냠지군 로장 주테다 견제 맹아 등기군 로장순이 송디 다능에 슈즈 테마스이네야 원분노 둘이야 자론디 다진냠지군 로장주디 원분놈부기 람드츠리야 아니 텐텐 텐디지 자르고레스 라 원분놈부기 람드츠기 피 타르투고 송디 양다 신종원다 텐도 남은 땅 인지군 기는 스세 담보 동번이 또비기 따와체 라 안디니 안디 또지 아니 심장 탐지 마리비 샤원도 큐리오바디 아니 콘두체니 아니 마리비 샤원도 큐리 둥아비 심진디 다 닌지 율드 샤니 아니 닌지곰 아니 잔주고 셈께 당 름바디 옹부놈부 로정주 름바드레스.
So to that, in training a mind with equalizing, exchanging self with others, or with the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, a distinction between practitioners was made. So equalizing, exchanging self with others is a method for training one's mind designed for those of sharper faculties. As it is said that the approach of those who are sharp faculties is that first of all, they understand the perfect, the real, and then on that basis, they develop compassion to sentient beings. So those of sharp faculties will first of all meditate on emptiness. It depends upon their realization of emptiness. They will then see how sentient beings are under the control of ignorance. And on that basis, they will develop compassion for those who are under the control of ignorance. This is the stages of training one's mind of those of sharp faculties.
Günde menga dün gonegi lo jansu xiaondi günde menga dün go lo jansu xiaondi ta pigi tanyam shijani ta ani mar shiba seti mar shiba samjan tamje rangi mar shibigi lo janondi zambala samjan tamje rangi imba di ömek rigbi druyaji re ma to bigi ngoto rigbi drub tuyeji chago mares hagosan öme ro kewa thame ba layanza simjin di machiban di ni cheyoba di machiba khatuchu motugaji dinti ömegi rigbi tone machiba drub ani maimba dushene loki so rimbachik sonyores ta di rimba di kasota ombu nombu gi lam tutsu rimba ta maja ombu tobu gi lam ombu tobu gi pigi chanju sem gombi gi ta ani rimbajile ya dinti so jariores ra inaya nganjula ya mache meba di rigbi drugers na zawnin drub thuk mares ina mache meba mache yobatya pigi ngudog rigbi gi drub thuk mares di weme gi rigbi drubchin ti chon di kam di yaschim shole gi dajin nyamba imba di ngudog rigbarang ani ro pigi drubchin sungu yanza di ombun tung numbu gi ani lam druzug rimba sungu yanza ombun numbu la ঠিকবি কলয়া অম্বু তুবু গিলাম রসুদি ছুটে মুগু বিসরছি তেদিঙা থকবা রেসরা কেরান থকবা সায়াগি ছেদটো জিঙিল তা লাবি খুরে তা
Then if you think of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, where we begin with, first of all, developing impartiality towards all sentient beings, and then on that basis we meditate on the recognition that of all sentient beings as having been mothers. When we develop the recognitions of sentient beings having been mothers, it is called reasoning of suitability. In that, when we think of sentient beings having acted as mothers, we think that it is actually suitable. It is suitable, or maybe in English, kind of in a more freestyle, you would say it's possible that they have acted as a mother. It's not a logical reasoning in which you prove that they have, that the sentient beings have been a mother or have not been a mother. Can you use this reason in order, for example, say that this particular sentient being hasn't acted as my mother, whereas the other sentient being has acted as my mother? You cannot prove that, but then still using the reflection on past and future lifetimes and the countless rebirths that we have already taken, then you come to the conclusion that therefore it is suitable, or it is possible, that all sentient beings have acted as my mother. So this is the way that the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions is using reasoning, and it is a system for those of lesser faculties. Whereas when you use the practice of equalizing, exchanging self with others, where you first of all prove emptiness, and then you use that in order to develop compassion for sentient beings who are controlled or under the sway of ignorance. It is a system that is more based on logic or logical reasoning, and it is of those four sharper faculties. Anyway, Geshe kind of is bringing up this point for those who might have had some doubt with respect to it.
Tadi shastra tadini sumba rangi theba shivan gywas ra rangi theba shivan gywa bi ngargel la soba da chiyora da ngi chin sambi ta chi UK la soba oduzo shigres tedi shingi tenje ja lensam tan ngosar mes ro jenden la ya tachigdu jacha gen ya thamba pigila ya chi ani pena sambi gi kolon thi thone ani chawa chebaina chawa ti khang chimje khang thambadi jela ya ta jinganzo do jing baina ani nge kyaran la roba chi nge chi chen nge kyaran la ya chue shi se chi yu khe joros di tsawa ni ni yung mares 싸우니 용 맞아. 간스 타 찍도 편반 바시마도 직 수술이야. 아니 미유지 샤니 젠든 지기요 말았어. 타 찍도 편반 들려 봐이나. 아니 제바당 알길 식을 써야 돼. 야식이 하단 말이었어.
In the first two lines in verse 109, it says one's own arrogance comes to be pacified. It says, due to that, although working for the welfare of others, there is no conceit or amazement. So sometimes we become proud about our activities, thinking that I have done such and such. But here, when you're so invested in benefiting others, when you are genuinely concerned about the welfare of others and wishing to benefit them, such conceit will not arise. So sometimes when we help others, we think that I've done such and such. I've helped you. I've done that much for your sake. So when you're solely interested in benefiting others, such amazement or such conceit will not arise.
다 생기된 라하버가와 대답에나 생기된 체자 니 튕기 장소년비 로섬 타네 텔랑오처 메도스 게 메도스.
It says, thus, as one takes great joy in the purpose of others, even though one works for the purpose of others, there is no puffed up thought of I am filled with kindness or a feeling of superiority in that regard.
Gengi tönla lakbar gawatis gengi tönla ta dedi gengi tön çeken seyda tsingrer da inju dedi gengi tön çeken seyda pigi jendön başıyla yemini gengi tön konala yemini ani ninji gomya digi losumda ngosar bi ci ngoso dileg maris ro lakbar sena masna an pigi ta ci 쟁tem 바실레야 미기야티 저 어디래 다 쟁tem 바실레야 미니 차와치 투바이나 아니 나르지다 제발라 소바 시그리스 용구마리스.
The commentary says, thus as one takes great joy in the purpose of others, in that you take great joy in being solely invested, solely interested in the purpose of others, in benefiting others. When that happens, then even though you work for the purpose of others, there is no puffed up thought of I am filled with kindness or a feeling of superiority in that regard.
Yeah.
So Victoria is asking, is equalizing and exchanging self for others a practice for beings of greater intelligence because you realize emptiness first or for another reason? 다신 냠제세 디 원본 numbugi so 탑소지 임백임센 디 때와이나르와 딜라 tambo tonitone 딜라테네 마레파 쿠넬라네기 셈첸 텐솔라니지 공게르와 제선 tambo 토니 또고르와스 디 김센 첸네 원본 numbu 탑된데 지게르베스
또 고그레스라고 말다. 제당 엄분 농부기 람드로스 송디 엄분 농부디 카르치어스라운디 비기게 모여기 네술티 아니 심죽지 온디 율무비 네술이야 아니 제바체트가치 율무비 네술 시비또기기 아니 가르토인 그리스라운디 아니 지 무비 네술 마시바디 몽바임바 몽바 대왕기 차단께네 아니 랭에바사네 단 콜 코즈르바디 아니 디톱기 연구여서레스 다 딘티기 토는 인지기니 잔주삼 공주디 원부 농부기 로단레스 로 레스티자 다 다시 냠지디야 대다 통바로지 다시 냠지디 다른 레스라고 말다 이나 대다 통바지 레스 송도스
저선 다시 냠제 냠는 채워이나 돈이 topic 야만은 돈이
tit
Gudun
kya yo samar
Kaba Yomarwa.
yo samar samudra kasan dashi nyam sudi dewa dewa de dungam man dewa ani jingzong yin ba ditong shigdo.
So if someone practices equalizing, exchanging self with others, it does not necessarily mean that they have realized emptiness or that they have understood emptiness. In general, it is explained that those of greater faculty are those that can analyze the reality of an object, the way that objects exist, the mode of abidance. So not understanding the reality of objects, not understanding the way that exist, which means that because of ignorance, sentient beings accumulate karma motivated by afflictions, which constitute the basis for again and again remaining in cyclic existence. So understanding that one generates compassion to sentient beings, then following the process in which you realize the reality of phenomena, the reality of objects, and then understanding how sentient beings are ignorant with respect to that reality, and because of that, they remain in samsara, is the way that those of faculties proceed. Now, for a similar reason, it says that equalizing and exchanging self with others is a practice for those of faculties. Since those of equalizing and exchanging self with others have to analyze, have to do a lot of analysis, and the analytical reasoning that they would be using would be quite sharp. It is said that this is a method for those of greater faculty. But it does not imply that those that practice equalizing and exchanging self with others will necessarily realize emptiness, or will have necessarily realized emptiness when they practice it.
Tadiri ta shiba lenda namen la toba mebanis, lenda namen la toba mebanis, ra namen la relchini, shendun la yo zungu yo mari, ani chik len la rewa chini, shendun la zungu meba inza, chik du shendun la gawi, namen debi rewa mes, ra di yo maris.
The next point says that the pleasure and benefits of such meditations do not depend on reciprocation and fully ripened effect. So while not accepting to be rewarded, not expecting to be rewarded, or not expecting for the ripening result to arise for the person benefiting others, the pleasure and benefits of such meditations will not depend on the wish to be reciprocated or for the ripening effect. Now let's look at the last two lines in verse 109. It says, because of the joy others' welfare unequivocally, there is no hope for ripening effects.
Tadilya dus yung chogras pena ta tobaro len la rewa chini ninji gomna kyon karyores namen la rewa chini ninji gomna kyon karyores ti chi javana des kode yung kusres ro re.
Now you might wonder with respect to that, what's the problem with wishing to get a positive result or hoping for a ripening effect when you benefit others? What's the problem with expecting something or wishing for something when you benefit others? Is there any problems with that?
Tirda len la reni ninji gomba ina ninji di ninji tsenye ba chagmondos namen la rewa chin namen gedebole ya rewa chin ninji gomba ina ninji di ninji tsenye ba chagyo mares kanzana pu teleya ki teleya randun zo sonde ach randun zo sonbi chawa chana di ani shendun la mi ba chago mares ani ninji chago mares da dira tenza ninji di ninji sama jiyonya la ya lenda namen la kana ya ani toba meba pi shen koni gutela ya mi ba chik mena ani chanju semgu gyu ninji chembo se di chag menza nyenga chembo cha de gor sro gogol so ra cha ro gor sro.
if you seek to be reciprocated when you benefit others, if you're hoping for the ripening effect when you're benefiting others, it means that you're interested in your own purpose. You're still pursuing your own purpose. And if you're still pursuing your own purpose, the compassion that you will develop for others will not be a fully fledged, impartial compassion, unbiased compassion. If your compassion is not a fully fledged compassion, if it is just a mere compassion, but not a fully fledged compassion, it means that bodhicitta will not arise on that basis. And that would be dangerous. That would be, you could say that would be falling to a sense of self-deception if we are still seeking to be reciprocated or hoping for the ripening effect when we benefit others.
제 타직도 젠든 주보 코나라 가위 남이긴 디비레와 메토스
The commentary says, as one only likes to accomplish the purpose of others, there is no hope for a ripening result.
자 타직세아드 타니 직랑 직셴 타직디 셴레 타직드랑레 랑라 믹사나 아니 대버친비 로종도 차고 말았어 셴라야 타직 코나레 미바치 디고레스 라 닌지기 간지 대버친비기 로종기 자왈이야 타직 코나레야 셴 직볼이야 미니 아니 다 로종야 고레스 디송고도 아스라
So there are a couple of points here with respect to this line. So first of all, when the English says there is no hope for a ripening result, that can also be read ambiguously in English. You can probably, I think that probably you can say, you will not be hoping for a result rather than saying that the result would be hopeless. So that's one thing. The second thing is that it says, as one only likes to accomplish the purpose of others. The way that it is written in Tibetan can also be translated in the following way, as there would be only one alternative, which is the purpose of others. You'll not be hoping for the ripening result. So saying that as there is only one alternative, only one way, it means that rather than being invested a bit in your own welfare, the only thing that you'll be interested in would be the welfare of others. That is the only alternative. That is the only option on the table. So since the only alternative would be the benefit of others, that would be the only thing that you're entertaining, you would not be hoping to be reciprocated or for a ripening result.
야 그다 나바 균센 테나스다 라 균센 테나 공도 쉬비다 균센 테나 다진 냠바 곰리바 다진 냠바 곰발이야다 고바 캬버지 여바 펜유 캬버지 여바 라 잠든 삼발레 아니지 셴든 삼바디 랍치와 임바 라 랍치와 인자 아니 셴든 삼야티 가니 융그레스 라운디 다진 냠바 곰비 로티 토비긴 거자 다 다진 냠 곰릭 바치 다진 냠바디 곰야디 외신 참바 릭바다 뎀바 ngoyo nezodo tumba imba chikse sungores-ra.
And then the last point is saying it is due to such reasons that meditating on the equality of self and others is said to be reasonable. So since this is the purpose of meditating on the benefit of others, since it is a beneficial attitude, then it is reasonable, it is suitable, it is worthy to meditate on the equality of self and others.
대외 대들 총문화 민니 레견 다송와 대신신라 송스입니다. 인지샘네 대들차스 로 인지샘 대들차스.
Verse 110 says, therefore, just as I protect myself from unpleasant things, however small, in the same way I should act towards others with a mind of protection and a compassionate mind.
네, 다 비기 대다에는 총나 매년례전 다송스라운디 배 아니 지 식춘중 진바이나야 매년 비기 땀춘중 진바이나야 티 마용 약체 소소 송집 지겨라스 다 디나신 기타 남킨 타두비 숨찬 탐젤라 동하 탐어정야 무용 비기 아니 비기 송심다 닌지기 셈 매년바 송디 다 곰바 차고 그랬어 곰고 그랬어
Just as we still find something to be unpleasant, even if it's just a slight offense, even if someone says something that is just slightly uncomfortable to us, we still dislike that. Also, with the mind seeking to protect others, we should protect others even when from something that is slight. This is the type of compassion that we should generate with respect to others in wishing to protect them even from something that is slight.
다진년보 고물이고 대변은 대들 충우 나 식민년보 짬례장 다송화신도 현지 문제부 동아야 송섬의 닌지섬의 대들 차오스 되나
Since it is appropriate to meditate on equalizing self and others, one should generate a mind of compassion and protect others from their undesired suffering, just as one protects oneself from even just a few unpleasant words.
다시바 다진년보 겁나 대들 끼니바 닌지섬 대들 끼니바 로 랑송만 비랑 제대로 송만 난시 셴야 대들도 송 뉴비기 닌지 끼니바디 간다지 연구레스 로지 송거라 다진 냠버 겁나 다진 냠버 곰비 로델야 콤리테나 아니 닌지 끼니바네스 셴지 르라 나오 냠바타 셴지 미라 니 미쿠 냠비 로 메지위 셴지 데둘라 랑단 드라이브 돌렌지 로 제들 끼셰나스 로 제들 끼셰나스
If you meditate in this way, you will be capable of developing the equality between self and others. So looking at the next point, point 4 in the extensive explanation of equalizing and extending self without extending self with others, sorry. Point 4 in the meditation on equalizing self with others says, one can develop such an attitude if one familiarizes oneself with the equality of self and others. So you'd be able to use that as a basis for developing compassion to other sentient beings and considering to benefit suffering sentient beings. If you develop such an attitude and familiarize yourself with the equality of self and others. So before we read through the next couple of verses, we begin with reading from the commentary. Says, first of all, with an argument, since one does not generate the thought that thinks of the other's body or I as my body, my I, how could one generate the awareness that accepts and rejects other happiness and suffering as one's own?
야다디 티와디 당당도디 로 도발롱당디 야부치 녜와체다 안자스침부 시발라기 렌디 ペマセバペパジャルシャグロスそのチャグドアスラアネティワディラヤシェンギルラヤガオニャンバチヨンシグマラワスシェンギミラヤニミコニャンビロキワチヨンゴマラワスヨンシグマラワステンザシェンギデドラヤソソダンダビギペゲアネトレンチヤギサムロジカンダヨンゴグレスラディラグダダ
Pay attention to the question. It's a good question, and also the way that Shantideva addresses this question and providing an answer to that is exceptional. So the question says, how can you, it is impossible to think of others' body as my body. we don't think of somebody else's eyes as my eyes, since it is impossible to think of somebody else's body as my body, somebody else's eyes as being my eyes. What is the purpose? What is the use of taking up or rejecting happiness and suffering?
레다 자스점 쇼를 송디 공바 이엔네 샨다기 코어타기 틱발라 모보 매반 겨르잔네 다고신 시바타르스 로 쇼라가 당부디 다 계란 마콤베 계란 로라야 콤지 마테비 qab라야 땡땡 계란기 딘디 깔레카고 용야 매겨러지 통시그리디네야 공바 제바이나 용거레스 페나 젠기 코와 타기 틱발라 아니 랑기 류트 매바질라야 간잠 질라야 콤비 왕기 차비 왕기 아니 니 류세지 용어든 간중 무슨 통양도 왔더라 파미 쿠달라야 니 류스니 빼 짜치면 진대지 남상말이야 용여러스 대난신지 용초그레스.
Verse 111, it says, although not my possessions, through familiarity I've come to regard the drops of sperm and blood of others as I. So indeed, when we're not familiar, when we're not used to thinking of others' body and others' eyes as my body, my eyes, it does seem to be extremely difficult or impossible. When we're familiar ourselves with that, it doesn't become that hard at all. It becomes easier. Like, for example, Shantideva says, look at the process by which we have come to regard this body, which is a body that is made of sperm and ovum that came from a father and mother. We came to regard this body to be my body. So when we think of these substances, sperm and egg, through a process of familiarity, we came to regard them as my body. So thinking of this logic, we can also we can also understand or become convinced that we can also, through a process of familiarity, regard the bodies of others and the eyes of others as being my body, my eyes.
대신 생길려야 다치 지 질무송스 베 아니 대난신기 아니 생길려야 베 소수글르난신 제바 송야디 가르치는 용어 말이스 용초그레스 아니 다길르 셴다디 비게 생글르난신 파샤발야 공부 좋나 아니 깔카고 가요 말이스 샤바 대들까와 메스.
So in the same way, Shantideva says, why should I be unable to apprehend the bodies of others as I and protect the bodies of others? It is not difficult to posit my body as also other.
제 마컴나 데미기 공부에는 셴 파다 마다기 코와타기 틱발라 다기 오부트바 매번 겨르잖니 공비 또기 다고신 시신 점바터 대신도 공부치나 젠기 르라야 다지 지실 모존데 존식다 공부치나 란단데 로기오 대나 신 집은 준비 편유 싸움니 젠기 동을 세월은 매버 차오 gyurka gyurka 토지레샤.
We read through the argument that was formulated at the beginning of the commentary. And then it says in the answer, if one does not meditate, then this is correct. But if one is able through familiarization to know and grasp at a drop of the father's and mother's semen and blood as one's own object, saying, this is mine, then why should one not be able to hold the body of others as one's own through familiarization? One should be able to do so. If one meditates, then one generates the mind thinking of it as one's own. Hence, having contemplated the benefits of eliminating the sufferings of others, one should strive to eliminate them. Then if one purposely stops cherishing one's body and meditates on substituting another, it will be without difficulty, like meditating on cherishing self.
되는 다 길로도 제반 좀 받지 gyurtu losan tu gyur kachili ngobo meban gyur kyan sheba sikang munjongs dena da gulun de jeban zamba che du ka ni shen du ya shaba tetar komna kawa meba da jinzin komba dan dawo da jinzin komba dan dawos loksaim
Losamene ne dira on so indicate all the cheshes and the just. All right, so there's one comment that is found in our Tibetan rendition. It says here in the footnote, Geshe says in his commentary, if in some translation, the line, although not becoming an object, does not exist. So let's look at verse 111. Although others' drop of semen and blood does not become an object, right? So that's what Geshe refers to. It says that in some translation of the Bodhisattva Avatara, this line is missing. So although others' drop of semen and blood does not become an object, through familiarization, one says mine and knows it as such. Now, Geshe Dhammarinchen or Geshe explains that in his commentary and saying that in order to eliminate the cherishing that we have to our own body, this line is mentioned, kind of Shantideva mentions this line, although others' drop of semen does not become an object of one's own self-cherishing. So if you habituate yourself to removing or cutting through your own self-cherishing, if you habituate yourself with that, you will find it not difficult at all to cherish sorry, I'll say it again. So if you completely eliminate your own self-cherishing, and rather than taking your own body as what you focus on, rather than taking your own body, you take the bodies of others and you think about it as my body. Through familiarization, it will be not difficult for you at all. Without any difficulty, you will come to cherish others' body as being your own body. Shall we leave it here for today? La. So. Someone begs to differ. Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sangye Dugyune Dowa Chikyama Lupa De Salagopa Sho Chanchu Semcho Rinpoche Magye Panange Yuji Kewa Nyamba Mepaya Gone Gondo Pewa Sho Kanri Rawe Kowe Shinkambi Pendan Dewa Malu Chungwene Chenre Siwan Tenzin Getsoi Shape Sinte Padu Ten Yuruchi Tuksu Chan Shin Jang Gun Gya We Tenzin Kyom Pe We Gun So Do Po Tse Cho Sung Ko We Le Mun Tu Du Pa Dang So Du Jen Kun Du Shap Ten Sho.
Thank you, Gashila. Thank you, Reverend Carlson.
Thank you.
Thank you.